Welcome to the Phocuswright session. So for the ones who don't know Phocuswright, we are the leading research authority. We look at all the markets, consumers, our intermediaries connect, and we deliver our research through different events throughout the year. Our global event is in the US in about 2 weeks. Then we have an event that we launched 2 years ago in Dublin, in Ireland, which takes place in May every year. And we're also launching for the first time this year Phocuswright India in April 2016. Today, we're going to present one of our latest pieces of research, the European State of Startup. So the format of the session is going to be as follows. We're going to introduce you the paper, and we will be happy to distribute the paper at the end of the session for free. We will give you a link where you can download that paper, and one of my colleagues will also be happy to give you some cards where you can download that particular paper and another paper that we will present on Wednesday on independent hotels in the US and in Europe. My colleague Charuta Fadnis, who is our Director of Research for Europe, he's going to introduce this session and will present you the data from this particular report, European State of Startup. Following that, we'll have 4 innovators, 4 carefully selected companies that we would like to introduce you to today. So I will welcome them on stage and ask them to sit while Charuta is going to present. Then each of them will present their business model, their ideas, their objectives, their challenges for around 4 to 5 minutes. And following each presentation, at the end of the 4 presentations, we will have a panel of discussion. We will welcome any question you may have, so please raise your hand and we'll be happy to take any question at the end of the session. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Tommaso, who is the co-founder of Indigo. Then I'd like to introduce you to Carlos, who is the founder and CEO of TripRebel. Then Clarke, who is the CEO and founder of Homestay. And then Alasdair Snow, who is the co-founder of Triptease. And now I will welcome my colleague, Charuta Fadnis, who is going to start the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florence. And hopefully we can get the slides up soon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here. And if we can cue up the slides, please. Wonderful. Thank you. OK, so every year we have hundreds of startups, hundreds of companies that start their existence. Some thrive, others fail. And some achieve so much success that they change the complete face of the industry. What we've been doing at Phocuswright is we've been tracking these startups since 2005. And the paper that Florence referenced is our latest edition. It tracks companies going from 2005 through 2014. We track the different sectors that they're in, the verticals, the horizontals, the funding they get, and what happens to them. So let me start. I need a clicker. OK. We've tracked 993 startups. I know, that's very precise. 993 startups since 2005. The criteria, well, they have to be focused on online travel. And they have to demonstrate some sort of business activity. And they have to have had some sort of publicly verifiable funding. So that's how we track it. If they're in private beta or if they're in stealth mode, we will track them if we can verify a source of funding. So 993 startups. And the way we categorize them, so we have 12 verticals, air, ground transportation, rail, you name it, 12 verticals, industry, and 11 horizontals. So the horizontal categories are things like mapping or social or mobile. That's pretty big. And so we track them across both of those, and then we look at what they've done. OK. So the amount of funding that startups have raised from 2005 till the end of 2014 was 12 billion and counting. And like I mentioned, it's publicly disclosed. It could be angel funding, venture capital, any kind of funding that we could find a source for. And Anyone want to take a guess at how much of this funding actually happened in 2014? 52%. Just in the last year alone, 52% of the funding took place. Now, there's a very simple explanation for that. But let me just say this. More than 150 startups, travel-related startups online, were begun every year going from 2011 to 2013. And that's since leveled off. The number of companies that, it grew significantly from 2008, 2009, and then it sort of leveled off. But what we have seen is that funding has picked up significantly. And that's where that 52% comes from. And like I said, it's really very simple. There's one word that explains that 52%. It's Uber. They had a massive round of funding and just queued the entire database. And when you think about capital, and you think about Uber, and then you think about the big unicorns, what happens is that, well, this. There are 6 companies that accounted for nearly half of the funding. 6 companies. Nearly a quarter is Uber. And then there's Airbnb, Didi Dashi in China, Trivago, which was acquired, and HomeAway and Chunar. So you can see how skewed the picture is in terms of funding. But even excluding these 6 companies, the amount of funding that took place for the other half, it's not insignificant. About 2.4 billion or so was the other share of funding. Okay. If you think about where these startups are, more than 9 in 10 are concentrated in 3 regions. So it's 40% in North America, and then about just over a quarter each in Europe and in Asia. So that's where the startups are. Of course, that's where the funding goes, right? The share of funding, nearly half of that went to the US, or to North America, I should say, but most of it in the US. Europe, struggling a little bit, 16, and then a third went to Asia. So it's not a pretty picture in Europe. If you have 26% of companies that start up and only 16% of the funding, you have to ask the question, so what's going on? Okay. So if you look at average funding rounds, and we had to take out some of the bigger investments. There was a 100 million round in BlaBlaCar, for example, and that kind of skews the whole thing. But you take those big funding rounds out, and what you see is the UK leads in terms of the number of companies that are started, as well as the funding, close to 500 million in funding for those 89 companies. Then we have Germany, followed by Switzerland. And this is actually according to the amount of investment, so not the number of companies. You'll see Switzerland has 11 companies, but it has quite a lot of funding. And on average, $7.8 million is the funding per company. Okay. Every startup wants to differentiate, right? They want to be different from their competitors. What tends to happen is that the most popular categories, the ones that people see have a lot of success, that's where the companies go. But that's not necessarily where investors are interested in. So the sweet spot for investors generally, or for startups rather, I should say, is generally an area that has high investor interest, but maybe a little less competition. And let's look at some of the categories that are getting a lot of attention, not just from investors, but also in terms of the number of startups, right? So looking at the horizontal, it's all mobile. 20% of all startups were mobile-oriented. And this is, mobile is the last 5 years or so. That it's picked up significantly. But 20% of all startups are mobile-oriented. In terms of how quickly the funding is growing. Just from 2011 to 2014, so in that 4-year span, funding increased by nearly 1,900%. Mobile is by far the darling of the investor community, and with good reason when you look at usage and things like that. When it comes to verticals, the startups all flock to lodging. Now, most of you here work in the travel industry. You know, lodging is where the money is in travel. It's the most profitable segment. But, there's always a but, if you look at the last few years, the funding is actually going to ground transportation, and it's going to peer-to-peer, I shouldn't say ground transportation, but rather peer-to-peer companies. They've been picking up ground significantly. And that's driven by two things. One is mobile, and the second is that whole business model, right? So you see a huge amount of growth there. Of the nearly $2.7 billion in funding in the ground transportation sector, Europe got about 400 million. And if you think about private accommodation, the Airbnbs of the world, the total funding there was 1.8 billion, of which Europe got a measly 160 million. So what is going on? One word, excessive regulation. And that's a big factor. I mean, regulation is a big challenge across the world, right? No one knows what to do, how to deal with these companies, what framework to apply. But Europe is particularly affected because you're dealing at it from a country level, whereas you go to the US, for example, and it's dealt with at a local level. So you have states or even individual cities regulating what the ground transportation companies can or cannot do, or what the Airbnbs can do or cannot do. The good thing for Europe is there's so much more to ground transportation here than just taxis. You have rail, there's the whole multimodal concept of, or door-to-door. So there's a lot going on in this space. And thankfully, there's an example all the way in India to follow. Redbus, which was acquired by the Naspers Group. It was set up in 2007, acquired in 2013 for about 94 million. So the money isn't all necessarily in taxis or ground transportation. Of course, there's many, many who imitate, but very few who truly innovate and change the industry. So for every Uber and Lyft, there is a Halo. And for every Airbnb, there is a One Fine Stay. Now, copycats are not necessarily bad. The most successful ones actually take a proven model and they tailor it. So they tailor the business model either to a new market or a niche, and it works really well. A lot of these companies are very successful in the areas that they've chosen to compete in. And when it comes to success, there's no guarantee, of course. So only 12% of the startups that we've tracked so far in Europe got acquired. And 20% actually shut down. So for every Kayak, ITA, TripAdvisor, Tunar, there are many, many more who don't make it. But of course, that's no reason not to dream, right? That's what startups are made of. They're dreams, and everyone wants that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So that's what keeps us going. For those of you who are interested, as my colleague mentioned, we have a paper that goes into a little more detail than what I've presented here that you can download. And we'll hand out the cards or stop by our booth, and we'd be happy to share the website where you can download it from. I think I have one more thing. For the startups in the room, if you haven't heard of the Phocuswright Travel Innovation Summit, please do go and take a look at our conferences, whether it's the one in the US or the one in Europe. We actually invite are some innovators to come and showcase their companies in front of a very distinguished panel of travel industry experts and investors. And our panel here actually has come through that process, and we'd love to have them tell you a little bit more about their companies. So Florence, over to you.
Thank you very much, Charuta. So we're going to welcome the first innovator that we've invited today. So Tommaso from Indigo is going to start. Please go ahead.
So thank you very much for having me here. Our company is called Indigo. It's an Irish-based company, as you can learn by my accent. We work in ground transportation, and what we really want to do is to make it possible for passengers to travel door to door. This is what they already do, but usually they book airport to airport. Now, on average, 60% of passengers landing at a European airport will take a bus, a train, a taxi, or an executive service to get to their final destination. And this is a market that is worth $70 billion all around the world. Still, it's not that easy to book and plan your ground transportation services as it is for hotels and flights. Not only do we care about numbers, but we care about feelings as well. We really want to get rid of one of those feelings that is very nasty about our travel experience, which is the arrival anxiety. Okay, I'm going to be landing at Gatwick Airport this morning, but how am I supposed to get to my final destination? Is this what I'm going to be finding once I leave the airport, once I leave those sliding doors? Now, today, I don't really want to talk about the product. I want to talk about the challenges that we have faced while we were building our solution. When it comes to Europe, this is very much a cross-cultural, cross-country issue, and we have so many languages as well that we need to take care of. And we have so many stakeholders. When it comes to ground transportation to and from airports, not only do we talk about transportation companies, but also about airlines and about airports themselves. This is what we created. It is a commercial and technological network that can distribute taxi, train, executive, and bus services via a single API. So it is a commercial and technological network that can power online travel agencies and airlines. They can add this component to their existing offers. So what we really want to do, what we really wanted to do to overcome the first challenge was to get in control. So we control the ticketing situation, we control the procedure, and we allow all the other retailers to use this component to power new offers. But when you get control, another challenge is, okay, how big should I become? So how much of this control I need to export in terms of geography? So these are all the routes that airlines cover when it comes to Heathrow Airport. And, well, how big should we become? Our answer to how big we should become was, well, we need to be big. Even though we talk about startups in travel industry, we don't really like, at least our belief is that we don't really like to be called startup. We really have to get as big as possible, as soon as possible. And our solution was to build a team which is divided into the two main areas, technology on one side and content on the other side. And team is the answer to us. Get all the languages on board, get all the skills on board as soon as possible. Today we can say that for our main customers, we cover 90% of their passenger journeys. Now, once you get big, that's fine. I mean, but you don't have to be as big as them. They run different businesses. They take care of different issues. They don't innovate anymore. And this is strong to say. I may want to rephrase it. They innovate in a different way. But mainly, they do operations very well. But when it comes to drive change, even though they were early adopters in IT and technology a few years ago, they are not positioned to drive change anymore as we are in terms of a young company that can rely on the fact that we are flexible and we can create new business models. And this is what we have done. We created a new way of distributing ground transportation services. So we want to be those that drive change. We had to position in that way. And once you position as the player that drives change, well, you can do it in a way that is useful for everybody. This is what is killing the user experience today. Waiting few seconds to get a fare, as well as filling tax forms to plan a journey to any destination. So what we wanted to do is to simplify everything. We went down to design and optimization. We put everything on the background, and we came up with this user interface. A single search box for users to enter a final address, and we take care of the rest. We can do that for our business-to-business product, as well as for our own application, which is an example of how design can very much improve the passenger experience. Connecting the dots for all the components in a travel itinerary can be done in a visual way as well, using a mobile application. So our fourth challenge, as you may have understood, was to inspire. And this is what we've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tommaso. So now we'll have our second innovator, Carlos, from TripRebel.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Carlos. I'm the CEO and founder of TripRebel. So I brought a few charts today because I really want to talk to you about what we're doing and challenges we're facing. We are in the hotel booking business. And if you imagine today, with all the technology out there, all the players out there, average traveler still needs 5 hours net browsing time to book a simple hotel. I mean, 5 hours is a lot of time. But interesting is that out of these 5 hours, travelers need just 1 hour to book a hotel they like, or to find a hotel they like. But they don't book. They will waste another 4 full hours cross-checking, comparing, trying to make sure they're getting the best deal. But why do they do that? If you look outside and look at the platforms and technologies they have at hand, you see, let's say, meta search as one of the best examples of tools that help consumers to select and find the best rates. But if you think about it, meta search sites like Trivago or Kayak are only giving consumers a snapshot of what in the market is available. So they basically take what's exactly in the moment of the search available and display that to consumers. But as we know, markets are not like a snapshot. They're more like a movie. Things change. Price will go up, price will go down all the time. What TripRebel does in a different way is that we capture exactly this time frame. So basically, we're decoupling the purchase decision, meaning the consumer coming to the website, selecting a hotel, making a pre-reservation, and the purchase of this rate. So with TripRebel, basically once you do that, what you're going to do is that every single day between the booking until the check-in, you're going to track in the market for either better rates for what you're looking for, or free up rates, meaning a better hotel or maybe a better room. And that's what we call the smartest way for you to book a hotel. Really don't look at rates anymore, don't chase them anymore, but let your purchase intent go out there and exemplify what you're looking for so that the best rates and the best offers can come to you. That's basically what we're looking for to build with TripRebel. We're already live out there doing that. And we believe that's a trend that's going to be impacting the whole industry. If you imagine teenagers today looking at their mobile phones 150 times a day, can you imagine that these people will spend 5 hours in front of a computer to book a simple hotel? They will not. They will interact with offers. They will interact with companies. They will use Messenger. They will use WhatsApp. And that's the direction we're going as well. So really to make a much more interactive process, a process that stretches throughout of time, where you have several points of interaction between the company behind and the consumer on the first place. So in that sense, this is, of course, a huge technological challenge for all of us. And to make it happen, of course, you need a very, very strong and innovative team. That's what we got. But that's, for us, in an early stage scenario here in Europe, besides funding, that's the second biggest challenge that every startup faces, to really find and keep the talent that you need to build a company and an extreme vision that we're focusing here with TripRebel. But once you do that, then you can make really a huge impact on the industry, because consumers are ready, I can tell you that. And that's also one of the reasons why we're selected by the European Commission as the best early stage startup of 2015. And if we believe in this vision, I will ask you to go around and try TripRebel, but also other platforms that are pushing the boundaries. Let's say GoButler, Facebook M, all other platforms out there. They are really decoupling the moment of purchase and the moment of the decision being made for the consumers. Thank you very much, and keep rebelling.
Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Alan Clarke, founder and CEO of Homestay.
Hi, everybody. I hope you didn't have as much difficulty as I did getting here with fog and all those things. So I just want to talk to you about two things. I want to describe for you what Homestay is and what homestays are, and then shed some light on the market opportunity that we're addressing. So for us, homestay.com is all about hosted travel. It's about delivering on experience-based travel through our hosts. So we're not a marketplace of spaces or places. We're a marketplace of people. So in homestay.com, when you book a homestay, it's about staying with the host. All of the inventory that we have on site is hosted. We're now in 150 countries and have signed up 50,000 hosts, launched July of 2013. But rather than listen to me tell you what we are, I'd rather show you what our hosts think of homestay experiences.
Travel isn't just about locations on a map or another stamp on a passport. Travel is about getting under the surface, a place with those who call it home.
Hola, hello.
Cuando llega un huésped a mi casa, primero le enseño un poquito el piso, pero luego me gusta enseñarle la ciudad y todo lo que tiene por el alrededor de mi casa. Y me encanta llevarlos a una ferida donde hacen el
message across that this is very much from home, and the only rule is that you feel welcome and you enjoy yourself and you treat it as your own.
So staying here is so literally at the other end of the Phoenix Park is the city, right at the gate.
A lo que quiere. A la parte de gustos gastronómicos como restaurantes.
Creo que es la mejor manera para descubrir una ciudad y descubrir a su gente.
Travel is about people, because people turn a location.
Well, that's unfortunate. So I will click on. So that gives you a sense of what the homestay experience is and what we try to deliver through and facilitate our hosts to deliver in their travel experiences. What I think is important, though, is as we embarked on this journey, people kind of thought, God, that's a tiny niche. What are you talking about? You know, Airbnb obviously exists, but you know, really staying in someone's home, do you really want to do that? And who wants to do that? So we did a body of work with Phocuswright, and we tried to put some color on why we're excited about this enormous market opportunity that we see. So on the left-hand side, you see the figure 1 in 10. 1 in 10 is the percentage of the adult traveling population in the US who've rented a spare room in someone's home in the last 12 months. That's up from 3% back in the 2011 or 12 survey that Phocuswright did. So this data is sourced from an 8,008 country survey that Phocuswright did. And that ranges when you look across the geographic spectrum of the globe. So 1 in 10 in the US ranges to 2 in 10 in places like Brazil and China. Putting that in context, the vacation rental industry itself puts the percentage participation rate at somewhere between 2 in 10 and 3 in 10 of the adult traveling population renting vacation homes. So this is an enormous market opportunity. What's more important, though, is to understand who. And you know, before I embarked on the homestay journey, I would have assumed that the majority of the participants would have been and in the 80-90% range, the millennial segment, which we hear a lot about, and it's a very valid and relevant segment to think about. But the reality is that 50% of the participants in homestay type experiences are also over the age of 30. So there is broad demographic appeal for this as a type and model of travel. What's quite interesting is, and this is probably somewhat unique to the homestay experience, is this is a solo travel platform. The majority of the participants on the homestay platform are solo travelers, so people who are traveling or relocating from country A to country B, people who are doing a lifelong journey of traveling from the east to the west of the US on a Harley and staying with a motorbike enthusiast all along the way. I mean, that's the experience we want to try and deliver. Why? It's not just about how much or who, but you need to understand why. And the top 5 reasons for booking, it's about authenticity, it's about experience-based travel. We ask the question of, is it just about being cheap? And the truth is it's not. It's about enjoying a home environment, it's about the location that you're in, and it's about getting that local experience that you can't get elsewhere. Coupled with the why on the demand side, the why on the hosting side is, yes, money is important, but there's a lot of personal, social reasons that drive people to be participants in marketplaces such as this. If you think about it, with an average booking length of 14 nights, if you're looking at someone for breakfast for 14 days, you got to be motivated by more than just money. And so that brings us to our hosts and our hosted experience. Everything that we do is focused on, we think of ourselves as a people-centric platform. We're excited by what we're doing. As the readers of USA Today last week nominated us as one of the top 5 global websites for travel in the world. So, we are very excited about what the homestay category of travel can be in the coming years. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Alan. So I'd like to add that if you're interested in getting a copy of the paper that Homestay did with Phocuswright, you can always stop by the Phocuswright booth, which is TT589 after this presentation, and we can also provide you a copy. So we're going to welcome our last innovator, Alasdair, who is co-founder of Triptease.
Yeah, hello everyone. Co-founder of a London and New York-based startup called Triptease. We build smart digital tools which help reconnect hoteliers with their guests online and drive more direct bookings. Big, expansive stuff, and I'll tell you a little bit how that works in practice in a moment. But I thought, given the subject, it might be quite nice to talk and share with you the journey we've been on as a startup inside Europe, and how we've got ourselves into a position where we get invited to speak at events like this and have considered of some interest. Although, I'll let you make your own minds up about that one. We actually started nearly 3 years ago, which is actually quite a long time in my life, and it's been a lot of fun, but an absolutely enormous amount has changed since we first began. But I guess the two kind of things have remained constant. These I call them like the foundational essences of the company, the kind of our direction and what has informed where we go and how we develop the product. And I guess the first of these was this sense that we felt, as consumers, online travel wasn't a particularly pleasant experience. I think everyone here knows the stats about the average person spending 38 days opening gazillions of browser tabs, feverishly searching for the best deal, and constantly this sense that you might be being ripped off or scammed, or there's a better option somewhere else, and this sense of unease. I just felt there's an enormous amount of angst in booking online travel that you don't get in other industries when you're buying a kettle or some furniture. So that was the first thing we kind of had in our minds. And the second thing was, we thought part of solving this was perhaps to get more people booking direct. So we noticed with the rise of the internet, this increasing disintermediation between hotels and their guests. And we thought potentially redressing that would help solve these problems. And so we just, unlike other sectors, there's this plethora of middlemen. You have margin, misspent value, just up and down the chain. So we thought, let's try and solve that. So we set about solving that probably the hardest way possible, which was to launch a consumer-focused iPad app, which was a lot of fun, and it burned really brightly for its brief life, and it attracted a lot of attention. We got featured on the Apple Store. We had very healthy user growth, but at the end of the day, didn't actually make any money. And so that became a bit of a problem. And just generally, it's the kind of endeavor which guzzles a lot of cash. So we quickly realized we needed to start exploring other opportunities. So we then, as part of the kind of the life cycle of this product, we'd been speaking to hotels to get them to sell inventory directly on our platform. And so we'd been having conversations with hotels. We started to get a better understanding of their pains and their frustrations. And so we then, we thought, well, potentially partnering with hotels might be a better way of solving a lot of these problems. And we then kind of, there were many months, we span out another product, many months kind of exploring new ideas, speaking to customers, and just focusing like on the actual problem, having a very clear focus on what exactly is the problem we're trying to solve. And out the back end of that came Price Check, which some of you may have heard of, but this essentially is this is a widget which sits directly on a hotel's website, and it addresses the #1 reason why someone would leave a hotel's website, which is they think they might be able to get a cheaper price elsewhere. They're inherently taught to compare prices. So this little fella pops up, and it compares the hotel price against available online travel agents, and in one fell swoop will drive up conversions on the direct channel from anywhere from 20 to 35%. And so it's having a huge, huge impact. And we launched this 9 months ago, and we've gone from 0 to 7,500 hotels, which is pretty extraordinary growth compared to our last product. And the really exciting thing for me is by the end of this year, we'll be driving an incremental revenue of $1 billion for our partner hotels, which is a fantastic redistribution of value back to the hotels. So we're quite excited about that. And there's lots of other interesting, exciting things coming. But I guess to wrap it up, I guess for me, the consumer in travel was extremely hard. Having a laser-like focus on the problem and executing against that. And then the third thing would be, I guess, that it's an incredibly long journey, and if you keep slugging it out and doing the basics right, you might just get there in the end. And just a small product plug, we have actually got a stand here, so if you'd like to come and speak to us and find out more, then please do swing by. We're in the travel tech area. We're all painfully nice, so thanks so much.
Thank you. So, thank you very much to each of you. So I'd like maybe to ask you, Alastair, the question first. At this stage, what's the most important to you? Your customers, developing your employees, your investors, or your partners?
So for me, definitely that, strangely, in many ways, we are a B2B company, but we're actually more of a B2B2C company in the sense that we actually have just a kind of religious focus on the guest. So we just think all the time about what exactly is the guest focus. And we're constantly reminding ourselves that we're not working on a product, we're working on a problem, and constantly thinking about that problem and how we can best solve it. So I guess, our main focus is just on the hotel's guests, as well as the hotels themselves.
All right. And you, Alan?
100% the customer. I think if you think about the chart that your colleague presented earlier on, I think businesses that survive the test of time are those that focus on delivering a great customer experience and deliver value to the customer. If you do that, then you're on the right path.
Okay. So Carlos, obviously looked at the presentation, and we know each other from the Phocuswright Europe in Dublin. So I'd like you to explain maybe to the audience why you choose to start this business.
Well, it was a kind of a life stage decision at first. So it was in a stage where I said, okay, well, I always wanted to do something in the area of travel with my own bare hands. And was the moment to do it from a life stage perspective. However, there was only, let's say, a personal level of the decision. But I think what impacted me the most was the fact that, and I think like out of the 4 startups here, 3 can testify exactly that. The trouble that travelers still need to go through to do simple things like go from A to B or stay in a place, and that's amazing. That's something that really triggers me at that point to start a company.
Okay. How do you get today about the process of innovating? Because we kept repeating through the different presentations from Charuta and from each of your presentations that today one of the biggest challenges, obviously, is to innovate for a startup. and not to copy and paste some business models that you see around. So how do you go about the process of innovating, building new products for your services, for your guests, the user experience? Do you take more like the Apple approach and build whatever you think the people want? Or do you look and listen at the market, sorry?
Well, that's in the sense that I think a couple process. So it's for us, it really depends on which element we're working on. Most of the cases, we already have a hypothesis out there. They'll say, okay, why are consumers not doing this? Why are consumers doing that? And I try to figure out, okay, what might be the reasons out of this behavior. I think innovation starts by observing behavior. At least that's how we see. And once you can observe behavior and can shape hypotheses, then you can probably test it. Not always you can do it, but most of the cases you can. And once you learn a bit more out of this behavior and how you can maybe guide behavior in a different way, then is when you start thinking about, okay, product and really features and what we believe is the innovation itself. But actually starts earlier in our case.
And you, Tommaso? What approach are you taking?
Well, I do agree with what you said, but also for us, it's all about, as I said, the passenger experience. And when it comes to innovation for us, it is about to come up with some sort of magic and make travel more seamless and more easy to plan and to experience.
So where do you get this magic?
Well, I think the magic comes from different sources. I mean, I like to get inspired looking at other companies as well as sitting in front of a whiteboard and start designing with my team. And that's a big part of the startup journey.
Okay. So one question that is going to be a bit for everybody that I believe is key today, and I'd like to understand what distribution is the most important to you, web or mobile?
Well, I'm going to kick off saying that to me,
you can start.
The real trick here is to come up with a synergy between the two platforms, the two devices, and there's no such a thing as only desktop distribution or only mobile distribution for most of us. Then we know a few startups that have chosen to go only mobile, but what I really believe is that the winner will go towards a synergy type of distribution, so you can start here and finish up over there, and really create a unique environment.
So you try to develop both at the same time, equally?
I think so. I think what you have to do is to mind the fact that we live in a multi-channel situation where passengers and travelers, they get feedbacks and insight and inspiration from different realities, different sides of the devices, as well as online and offline. So I think a synergy between all these elements is the way to go.
Okay. What do you think? What's the most important to you, web or mobile?
Well, definitely both. I mean, we focus very, very strongly on mobile as well as web. I mean, there's such a rising number of visitors coming through mobile, and it's obviously increasing, and I think it's just important to strengthen your position there. And I mean, the product I spoke about today works about 10 times better on mobile.
Well,
the ability for people to compare on mobile is that much harder, so bringing that pricing and surfacing on mobile actually has an enormous impact. Yeah.
Yes. I would think, Alan, for you, it would be the same, no? With the product you have.
Yeah, I think two sort of simple points. One, I used to run some gaming products for an online business or a gaming company called Paddy Power. And it was always weird to me that there was a delineation between the offline brand and the online brand, because quite frankly, the customer is the same customer is the same customer. So what you just need to understand is what's the customer journey that your customers are going on, and deliver the right product experience to them that's of consistent quality at the right time, because you will find the same customer will interact with you. They might search on mobile, they might interact with a host on desktop, and then they might book again on an iOS app. So
yes, but do you think the answer would be different from a year from now? Do you think you will still have the same answer in a year?
I think if you focus on the customer journey,
your market,
you'll find that some people will be desktop-centric, some people will be mobile-centric, and some people will be a mix of both. And you just need to make sure you understand that.
How important is social media plays for TripRebel?
Well, it was for us from the beginning, from the first, actually, even before we launched, we already had social media channels in the big ones, Twitter, Facebook, and so on. And it was like to say what got the balls rolling for TripRebel, I would say. And we do, of course, count on that still today, and we have been growing our base very strongly via these channels. And the good thing about social media is that is like a dialogue, and it's not only about getting customers. We actually don't get that many customers out of social media, but what we get is a lot of feedback.
Yes.
And also, more importantly, we get also a lot of further word of mouth. So people that are interacting with your brand on social media, they might not buy your product, maybe they're too young or something like that, but they are multiplicators if they like what you're doing. And that's something that we took extremely care on TripRebel to create a brand that stands for something, that has a different look and feel and different appeal to people that they can relate to. And it's not a tool anymore.
So that's interesting because you've decided to invest in a TV advertising campaign, right, for next year.
Correct.
So how would you compare with the efforts that you put on social media?
Well, for us, it's like the next step. I would say like social media is a great channel to test things off and to get your message right. However, at some point, we of course need to test waters in a more broader channel. And the fact we have that we also or why we use social media in the beginning so strongly in content marketing as a whole is that the product is somehow new, so we need to explain consumers. We need to get some more let's say, information out there so that they get what you're doing. And you can do that very well with content marketing, but your reach is somehow limited. But with TV, of course, this alternative is there, and you can really communicate what you're doing differently, and people get immediately if the creative's good. That's why we're doing that. Yeah.
Okay. And for you, Alan, do you use social media as well quite a lot?
Absolutely. I think it's part of the channel mix. I think it's about delivering the right type of message to that audience that's relevant to them. I think some of the social media platforms deliver very powerful targeting techniques to allow you to target specific demographics with specific audiences. And just the extent to which you use it is a function of what message do you want to deliver to what audience at what point in time.
Thank you. So before I ask my next question, I'd like to check if there is any question from the audience. I think, yes, here we have a gentleman who'd like to ask a question. Can someone give him a mic? Thank you. Yes, you can chat as well.
Hello. Nice to see everyone. My name is Valentin Dombrovsky. Hello, online travel enthusiast. I wanted to ask a couple of questions to everyone in the panel. First question is, who is your main competitor, whom you see as the main threat to your company? And the second question is a bit different. Are you looking to be acquired as a startup? We saw some data on acquired startups. And if you are looking to be acquired, then what company might be your strategic partner? What company might acquire your company? So you're welcome.
Please. Go ahead.
So I'm gonna
Whoever wants to
I'm going to start. So in my space, we have few companies working on finding the right solution for door-to-door and integrating the ground transportation components within existing offers. And but the main competitor, I would say, that is still the offline market. So whenever it comes to ground, it's still mainly booked and purchased offline. So whenever it comes to our peers and ourselves as well, nobody has found yet the right recipe to fight back against the offline situation. Even though offline has got its great advantages, and no, we really need to incorporate offline within the multi-channel dimension that I was talking about before, but that is still the big elephant in the room. When it comes to do I want to be acquired or not? That is an exit strategy that every startup is looking at. By now, we are looking at growing as an international business, so it is not our exit strategy right now.
Would you like to ask the same question to the rest of the panels? Would you like to follow Alastair? Would you like to answer the question as well?
Yes, so for us on the competitor one,
so who's your competition?
It's an interesting one. So in the last couple of months, there's been a small flurry of copycats, which is I actually find quite flattering, which is because it just merely confirms that we are actually, what we're doing works and does drive value. So I guess there's the sense that some people may mimic what we do and try and do it and steal certain markets before we get to them. But I think it's healthy. You know, it keeps me on my toes. Like we constantly focus on the customer and see what they do, and so we're constantly innovating and making sure the product is deep and we retain market leading status. The acquisition one though, I mean, it's just not something you feed into your kind of like weekly meetings, right? I don't wake up thinking about exit strategies, but the moment you take on institutional funding, as we've done, that's the obvious outcome, right? And I think, yes, I wouldn't like to speculate maybe on where that's going, and we don't really give it much thought. But yeah, I mean, we have, as I say, we are growing quite rapidly, and we have a lot of relationships now with hotels, and that may be an exciting proposition to somebody, but yeah, not sure.
Okay. Alan?
Yeah, so for me, I wanted to do the work with Phocuswright to answer that question with data. So as the peer-to-peer lodging space becomes more known and more understood, as is normal, niches within that very large travel market become clear. So I see us positioned between Couchsurfing and Airbnb. If you kind of go through a spectrum, it kind of goes Couchsurfing, homestay, Airbnb, one fine stay. That's how I think about the spectrum of different options or use cases that people have. In terms of the acquisition question, I think about delivering shareholder value and return. I think about delivering a valuable business that's got solid fundamentals. And if I focus on that, I don't know what the exit strategy will be.
Well,
yes.
From our side, I think we see ourselves as a next generation of a meta search price comparison tool. So if you imagine that sense, the ones like the big ones, Kayak and Trivago being the big ones, competing directly to what we're doing. In terms of acquisition, we still kept our options open, so we haven't received VC funding yet. So we have done business angels. We are going to do crowdfunding. So we want to have our options also to go by ourselves through this very competitive and very big market, which is a tricky one, I know.
We have time for one more question, if there is some question in the audience. Yes?
Well, it's a question for homestay. And my question is about sustainability. How sustainable is homestay in terms of you guys encouraging families to walk people around and guests around? They have no licenses. In a lot of countries, we have people that are guides and have to take very hard exams to be licenses. And we have an increasing number of families which are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. This is creating huge problems in certain countries because the people feel that it is absolutely unsustainable.
Yeah, so I think that's a broad topic of regulation. And I think as businesses and business models emerge, I think that the traditional way of doing things becomes challenged. To give you a little bit of context for where homestay came from, if you think about the education travel space specifically, which has existed for decades, where people travel to London to learn English or travel to Spain to learn Spanish, they've always stayed in a homestay environment. And I think that we are empowering greater transparency and scale amongst people who've already been doing this type of offering this type of travel experience to date. I think on a broader regulation point, look, I think regulation is an important factor in the growth of new industries or existing industries being morphed into something different. And if you look at what the UK has done in terms of interacting, and the government in the UK has done in terms of interacting with the shared economy companies and the existing incumbents to try and create a framework for regulation that's appropriate, I think that's a way that you can build sustainability into these business models.
Does it answer your question? No. Well, I
think it's not where. Yeah, there we are. Yes, but you're going ahead. I mean, you're doing that before the framework comes in. So what you're telling the families is walk them around the Colosseum or walk them around the Forum and tell them about the Forum, and that's what's happening, which is unsustainable. So you can't just say, well, the UK did this, because you should be waiting the UK to do that before you come in and tell the families to do that. And homestay is, it's not just a staying at home, but asking people to do a local experience, and they're not prepared to do any kind of guiding.
And it's up to the host to live on any spectrum of that. And I'm happy to have a chat with you about it, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, but it's up to you as a company to say the family will not be able to do certain things, whereas you are saying to the families, yes, go, you have a great time with the locals and walk around with them. So, that's it.
Maybe you can, I mean, if we're talking about innovation in the context of startups, I think it's hard for any of us to wait for the governments to make the first step in order to innovate.
Come on, guys. I mean, you can't go and walk and talk about the Colosseum if you have no clue about it. You can't tell the family. Just go around and tell it, and they will tell you it was built in the 1300s, whatever, because they have no clue. I mean, you should be saying that's a homestay, have a local experience, eat with them, but you can't just encourage them to walk around. It is a problem. Licensed guides have been studying very hard to get a license. I mean, so.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're going to wrap up the session, and we're happy to take more questions off the stage as well. So thank you very much for attending.